writing technique, methodology, perspectives, philosophy, etc. Today, just slightly as it is said to revise, I also will focus on some ideas about writer. Let's talk about Rudyard Kipling before I start telling the story. Rudyard Kipling, I think you know this writer. Do you know or not? Rudyard Kipling?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. You must have been watching one very famous show, that is the Jungle Book.
Yes, sir.
That Jungle Book was written by Rudyard Kipling. Hey, so it's slide share. Hmm. Okay, let's see. There can be behind writing any story, there can be some hidden motive of the authors. If we talk some of the writers, some of the philosophers, whatever they write, to some extent, in some corner of their writing, there prevails their personal experience. If we talk about D.H. Lawrence, have you heard this name, D.H. Lawrence? Have you heard this name, D.H. Lawrence?
No, sir.
Yes or no? No? A bit loudly. Not
No,
heard?
sir.
Not heard. Listen, D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence always presented himself in the writings. Let that be story like The Rocking Horse Winner or novels like The Rainbow, Women in Love, etc. Actually, he was from a unique family. His father was a miner. I think you know miner means the person who works in mine. And his mother was from very rich family. In the beginning they fell in love, they got married, but ultimately what happened, the mother began to just always be unsatisfied regarding financial status. She always tried to run after money, 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 and his father always tried to satisfy her in spite of having low income, because she was from a rich family and he could not satisfy her financial need. So those things, whatever struggle he saw from early days, D.H. Lawrence mentioned in his writings the status of family in terms of financial condition. You can find that we talk about women in love, or we talk about the rainbow, or his short story, The Rocking Horse Winner. You can find in internet also. If you are interested, please read that. The Rocking Horse Winner by D.H. Lawrence. Now, if you talk about the gardener, let's some his background. Rudyard Kipling, in his early writings, he appreciated war. He found beauty in war. What he said, that war gives an identity to a person who deserves to be introduced or identified in the society. He should come ahead. He should come forward with the help of war. War is only decisive situation when he or she becomes stronger, or let's say strongest among the all. So Rudyard Kipling in the beginning, he appreciated war. He liked war. He loved war. But I think you know he was born in India, he was brought up in India. His own son once had been in war in Burma, Burmese war, and unfortunately his son was killed. As his son was killed, then he came to know the agony in losing someone from family, the loved one in war. Since the death of his own son, he began to write the stories against war. Because in war, not only an army is killed, behind army, behind him, there can be his loved one, there can be his family members, there can be his parents, there can be his well-wishers. So those thinking those situations from ground level, from the perspective of a warrior who dies in war, Rudyard Kipling wrote this story, The Gardener. Title talks about a person who takes care of garden. But we find in the story the gardener appears only at the end of the story. Are you getting what I'm telling? What I'm talking? Hello, class.
Yes, sir.
A bit louder, please. I'm not getting to you. Listen. Let me go towards the story now. Let's see what kind of situations have been presented by Rudyard Kipling in this story, The Gardener. Helen Turrell. Helen Turrell had told one story without making a single mistake to hundreds of people about her brother George Turrell and nephew Michael. Everybody came and asked about Michael as he was brought very young by Helen Turrell. And Helen Turrell always told a story that her brother George Turrell lived in India as non-commissioned officer. As he lived in India as a non-commissioned officer, she went to meet him in India. He was married over there, and George Turrell loved riding horse. He was fond of horse riding. Helen told this story to everyone who asked about Michael. As George was fond of horse riding, one day riding a horse, he fell off it and got very badly injured. His wife was pregnant, almost about to give birth to a child. When he was injured, his wife also was admitted in the hospital. And in that injury, unfortunately, George Turrell died. As her brother died, she was very sadly grieved on the demise of her brother. Only support was her sister-in-law. But her sister-in-law also was very sadly grieved on the demise of her husband. So after giving birth to a child, she could not bear the excess tragedy, so she also passed away. So newly born baby was none other than Michael. Helen Turrell got that nephew because her brother George Turrell died. Sister-in-law also died. And in newly born baby, infant baby, Michael was with her. And in India, there was no job for her. That's why ultimately she came back to England. This story was told by Helen to hundreds of people who ever asked about Michael. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's continue. But the story behind Michael and Helen's relationship was a bit different. She always said that Michael was her nephew. But behind that, there was a story because she was in love with an army who had been to France in a battlefield. Unfortunately, when he departed, within few weeks, let us say, Helen got to know that she was pregnant. Her boyfriend went to in France, but in the battlefield, he was killed. Someone brought her a bad news that her boyfriend was killed in a battlefield in France. Pregnant Helen was out of mind at that moment, what to do and what not to do. Ultimately, what she did, she decided to keep that baby as a souvenir, as a gift from her boyfriend. And eventually, she traveled southern part of France. In southern part of France, she gave birth to Michael. With a newly born baby, she came back to England. And whoever asked about Michael, she made up a story creating George Torrell as her brother and her sister-in-law giving birth to Michael. But real story was what? Michael was her own son. But she had not told anyone that Michael was her own son. She always said that he was her nephew. Michael began to grow. Always, as he began to grow, always he just had to call her aunt. As he was a bit younger, one day he asked, "Where is my father?" Then Helen said, "Your father is dead." While horse riding, he fell off the horse and he was badly injured. In hospital, he passed away. Then where is my mother? Michael asked to Helen. Helen said, "Your mother also is dead because after giving birth to you, she passed away." But Michael did not agree with that one. What she said, she said, "No, my mother is not dead. It's you. You are my mother." But Helen said, "No, my child, you are my nephew. No, I won't call you aunt. I'll call you mother." Michael said so. Helen was worried how could she allow him to call her mother. Then she began to convince him, "Okay, Michael, let's have a deal." Then he asked, "What?" She said, "Okay, you can call me mom only in bedtime. And during other time of the day, you have to call me aunt. Is that okay?" Michael said, "Okay, done." So both of them agreed on that deal that Helen can be called mother in bedtime, but during daytime, he had to call her aunt. And we simply can understand a feeling of a mother when her own child calls her mom. She was overwhelmed with joy when he called her mom. Such feeling used to come in her. She used to feel very happy, excited when Michael called her mom in bedtime. And that excitement she wanted to share with the other, but there was condition with Michael. He couldn't tell others. But one day, one neighboring person came with excitement. She told her neighboring person that, we have a deal. Michael calls me mother in bedtime, and during the day, he calls me aunt. Michael heard Helen telling about mother and aunt to the neighboring person. Michael got angry. As Michael got angry, he, after the departure of that neighboring person, he came to Helen and said, "You broke the promise. Now I want to call you mom. You broke my heart. You hurt me. I'm sad. I'm very sadly just broken." Michael said. Helen said, "My child, don't say like that. No, you broke my heart. You broke the promise. And I'm crying now. One day I will die, and my departure will hurt you." Helen was very badly broken. My goodness, she hugged Michael and said, "My child, don't say like that. Please don't say. I'm extremely sorry. I will tell no one till now. Afterwards, I take promise. I won't tell anyone." So that was a scene that we find Helen and Michael's emotional scene. Michael began to grow. Helen just stopped sharing with the others regarding she was called mom by Michael. Time passed on. Time passed on. Several years passed. Meanwhile, what happened? There was a war in France. A war broke in France. So government had announced the application for from the youth to join army and help in France. Michael, without informing to Helen, applied for lieutenant. When he applied, eventually he was selected. And as he was selected, then only he told Helen that he had applied for army lieutenant and he has been selected. Helen was shocked. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked. "No, it's my choice. I wanted to go to France." Again, she was shocked. "France? What did you say, Michael?" "Yeah, I have to go to France. For France, there was application asked and I had applied." Now Helen was very much sad, very sad, let us say. She could not tell about her boyfriend's date in France. She could not tell about tragedy of her own. But when Michael said that he was going to join army and going to France, somehow she had got one kind of very cold feeling, a sad feeling. She was not happy. She was disappointed. After some time, Michael, promising to write frequently to Helen, took a leap from England towards France for the battlefield. He waited in the battlefield. Helen was very much sad, very much worried. She was praying to the God, "Oh God, please save my child. Oh God, please save Michael. Let me not listen any bad news." Michael kept writing letters. She received, and she was a bit happy anyway, because Michael wrote in his letter that he did not have to go in the battlefield. He was stationed in, what we say, storeroom. He had to stay in his storeroom, and from there he had to dispatch the weapons. Helen was a bit convinced, consoled, let us say. Time passed. One day, what happened? A bomb thrown by an enemy dropped in that storeroom. It exploded, and in that explosion, Michael was killed. Few days, only August, she had received one letter by Michael that he was fine. Then within 2 or 3 days, she received one message, a wire, a telegram, that a bomb exploded in his office and Michael is missing. Helen Tuttle rushed towards army headquarters to know about Michael's condition. No one told the reality. Everyone said that they are trying to find the condition of Michael. Everyone's convinced her that he is okay. But she knew that in army's language, missing means gone. Missing means dead. No chances of survival. She was sadly grieved, but she was not told by any army officer that her nephew was killed. She frequently visited army office. She frequently just came over there to know Michael's real condition. No one told. Eventually, one day, she was told by an army commander that yes, in the battlefield, though he was not sent, he was kept in a storeroom. A bomb exploded, and that explosion, Michael has passed away. Now imagine what happened to Helen. How was she broken? How much she might have cried. She cried a lot. There was no one to support him. There was no one to console him. She just cried and cried and cried. Ultimately, she asked the army officers where Michael's dead body was. The army officers began to just see the record. Meanwhile, there was an officer's wife. She came to ask. She was in tears. Helen was in tears, and that officer's wife asked her what happened. Then she told the reality. My nephew had been to battlefield, and a bomb exploded in an office where he was stationed, and in that explosion, he passed away. That lady said, "Oh, it was very sad. But if he had been in the battlefield, if he had been killed in the battlefield, it would have been better," she said in that way, officer's wife. But the agony that she went inside, nobody could measure, nobody could judge it. Only Helen knew, only Helen felt that agony. She asked frequently to the officers about where Michael's dead body was buried, where his dead body was cremated. So after long investigation, long search, one of the officers gave her the record that Michael's dead body was cremated or buried in Hagensil third graveyard. In wartime, what happens? Huge areas can be occupied for burying the dead bodies. Just like this, for few months, you might have heard in foreign land, in other countries, let us say Europe and America, huge area of lands has been covered for burial of corona dead peoples like that. So in France there was a huge cemetery graveyard in Hagensil third. In that Hagensil third, Michael's dead body was buried. She took the address, instantly sent a wire to the hotel, and booked a hotel room in Hazenville Third because she decided to go to France and see the grave of Michael at least. She came home, packed her luggage, and started a journey towards France. She went with heavy heart, ultimately reached Hagenville Third. She went in the graveyard cemetery, but she could not locate in which column, in which row Michael was buried. She could not find. She came back hotel, and in hotel lobby she was having some coffee. Meanwhile, a lady, Mrs. Carsworth, came over there. Both of them, Helen and Mrs. Carsworth, exchanged their introduction. Mrs. Carsworth said that she was a news reporter. She had come over there in Hazel Third to see the condition of grave, how the dead bodies were buried. She had come over there to observe and report to the magazine. She was very much talkative lady. And Scarsworth already disturbed Helen. She was not in mood of talking. So, though it was early, she was not in mood of talking. Helen took a leap from Mrs. Scarsworth and went towards her own room. She was just sitting in bed, not feeling sleepy. After some time, there was a knock at the door. Someone had knocked at the door. She opened the door, and when she opened the door, she was shocked because it was Mrs. Scarsworth. She came inside and she locked the door herself, Mrs. Scarsworth. Helen was surprised why she had come over there. But when Mrs. Carsworth had entered inside the room, she was not the same lady who was in the lobby hall. She was not as talkative as she presented herself in the first meeting. 10:30. She looked disappointed. She looked sad. Helen was surprised. Is it the same lady whom I met at the beginning in the lobby hall and right now in my room? She was surprised. Mrs. Carsworth began to just express her feeling in tears. She said that actually she was not a press reporter, a news reporter. She had come there to see the grave of someone special. Helen was surprised. What do you mean? Scarsworth said that yes, I lost my boyfriend here in war in France. He was killed. So I came here to see his grave. She was very much sad. Helen asked, how long had you been in relationship? Then Scarsworth said that I was in a relationship for last 6 years and 4 months. Both saddened fellows, let us say, expressed one another's feelings. Still, she said, Helen said that she had been there to see the grave of her Lieutenant nephew, George Tarrell. Sorry, Michael Tarrell. Next day, next day, Helen Tarrell decided to go to see the grave. She went to Hagengill Third graveyard. Hello class, are you getting me?
Yes, sir. Sir, your explanation is amazing.
Sorry?
You are explaining in very simple and amazing way, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Helen Tarrell next day went to the graveyard Hagengill Third. She moved here and there, this corner, that row, that column, everywhere she went, but could not locate where Michael's grave was. There was a person. She looked at Helen from top to bottom, came close to her, and asked what she was doing, whom she was searching. Then Helen Tarrell said that I'm searching the grave of my nephew, Lieutenant Michael Tarrell. Again, the gardener looked at her, Helen, top to bottom, and told her, come with me. I will show you the grave of your son. Helen followed the gardener, that stranger, let us say. He showed her Michael's grave. She offered some flower, expressed her sorrow, cried for a while, and ultimately departed. As she departed from there, she turned behind, looked at that stranger, and when she looked at him, he was taking care of grave, and she thought that he might be the gardener taking care of the grave. Story finishes. I hope you got the story right.
Yes, sir.